5,000 years ago, while the rest of the ancient world struggled to tame nature, a civilization rose that seemed to live in quiet harmony with it. Its cities carefully planned, its people prosperous, its rivers life-giving and predictable. Then, without a single conquering army, without clear records of war or apocalypse, this civilization slowly unraveled and faded into silence. The Indus Valley Civilization did not fall in a night of fire. It dissolved step by step as the climate itself turned against it, leaving behind ruins, unanswered questions, and a warning that still echoes today. The story begins around 3300 BCE in the fertile plains of what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Fed by the mighty Indus River and its tributaries, early farming communities learned to read the rhythms of water and seasons. Monsoon rains arrived reliably, flooding fields just enough to renew the soil. Wheat and barley thrived. Villages expanded into towns, and towns into some of the largest urban centers the ancient world had ever seen. By 2600 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization had entered its mature phase, stretching across more than 1 million square kilometers, larger than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia at their peaks. Cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dolavira, and Lothal emerged with an order that still astonishes archaeologists. Streets ran in precise grids. Homes were built from standardized bricks. Advanced drainage systems carried wastewater away from houses, suggesting an obsession with cleanliness and civic planning unmatched in the ancient world. Granaries stood tall, docks connected cities to long-distance trade, and seals carved with mysterious symbols traveled as far as Mesopotamia. This was a civilization of merchants, engineers, and planners, deeply connected to its environment and dependent on its stability. For centuries, the climate cooperated. The summer monsoon, driven by temperature differences between land and sea, delivered dependable rainfall. Rivers swelled and receded in predictable cycles, feeding agriculture and trade routes alike. The Indus River was not just a source of water, it was the spine of the civilization, shaping settlement patterns, economic networks, and cultural identity. As long as the monsoon remained strong, the civilization flourished, quietly confident in the natural order of the world. But nature, as history repeatedly shows, is never static. Around 2200 BCE, subtle changes began to ripple across the region. Climate records preserved in lake sediments, cave formations, and ocean cores tell a story invisible to the people living through it at first. The monsoon began to weaken. Rainfall became less reliable, arriving late or falling unevenly. Rivers that once flowed year-round started to shift their courses or dry seasonally. What had been a stable environmental foundation slowly turned unpredictable. At first, the changes may have seemed manageable. Farmers adjusted planting times. Communities dug deeper wells and expanded water storage. Some cities like Dolavira invested heavily in massive reservoirs, suggesting an increasing struggle to capture and conserve water. Yet these adaptations hint at a deeper problem. The climate was no longer providing the surplus that had sustained urban life. Agriculture became riskier. Food production fluctuated. The margin for error narrowed. As decades passed, the environmental stress intensified. Around 2000 BCE, the monsoon weakened further, not temporarily, but as part of a long-term climatic shift. The once mighty Gagahakra river system, often linked to the legendary Saraswati River, began to dry up, likely due to reduced rainfall and tectonic changes that diverted its sources. Entire settlements that depended on this river were suddenly stranded, their lifelines cut off. Cities that had thrived for centuries found themselves in landscapes that could no longer support large populations. This is where the Indus story becomes hauntingly quiet. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, there are no royal inscriptions describing famine or divine punishment, no chronicles of collapse. Instead, the archaeological record shows gradual abandonment. Large cities were not violently destroyed. They were slowly emptied. Urban planning declined. Brick standards changed. Long-distance trade networks weakened and eventually broke apart. The seals that once symbolized a connected world disappeared, replaced by more localized styles and traditions. Midway through this decline, historians encounter mysteries that still provoke debate. Why, despite their engineering skills, did the Indus people not build large-scale irrigation canals like those in Mesopotamia? Was their social system too decentralized to mobilize massive state projects? Or did their philosophy emphasize living within natural limits rather than reshaping the landscape? Some scholars suggest that this very restraint, once a strength, became a vulnerability when the climate demanded more aggressive adaptation. There are also questions about migration. As water sources failed, people did not vanish. They moved. Archaeological evidence shows populations shifting eastward toward the Ganges Plain, where monsoon patterns remain more stable. Instead of a dramatic collapse, the Indus civilization appears to have transformed, fragmenting into smaller rural communities. Urban life gave way to village-based survival. Writing systems disappeared, not necessarily because knowledge was lost, but because complex administration was no longer needed or possible in a harsher environment. Another debate centers on timing. Did a single climatic event doom the civilization? Or was it the cumulative effect of centuries of gradual drying? Many scientists now point to a global climatic event around 2200 BCE, sometimes called the 4.2 kilo-year event, which affected civilizations across the Old World. In Mesopotamia, it brought drought and empire collapse. In Egypt, political instability. In the Indus Valley, it may have been the final turning point, pushing an already strained system beyond recovery. By 1300 BCE, the great cities of the Indus were memories buried under silt and sand. Yet their influence did not vanish. Agricultural practices, craft traditions, and settlement patterns carried forward into later South Asian cultures. The people adapted, survived, and reshaped their world on smaller scales. The civilization did not end. It changed form, leaving behind a legacy written not in monuments, but in continuity. Today, as scientists decode ancient climates using modern technology, the Indus Valley Civilization stands as one of the earliest large societies to be reshaped by long-term climate change. Its story challenges the idea that civilizations fall only through war or invasion. It reminds us that even the most advanced systems are bound to environmental limits, and that collapse can be quiet, slow, and almost invisible to those living through it. In the end, the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro do not accuse nature alone. They ask deeper questions about resilience, adaptation, and foresight. How long can a society rely on patterns it assumes will never change? And if a civilization as sophisticated as the Indus could be undone not by enemies, but by shifting winds and failing rains, what does that say about the fragile balance that sustains our own world today?